All right, welcome back to the PSA Sunday Sitdown. Today's guest, Tony Kelbert. Tony, thank you for jumping on. And I know it was funny, as soon as I hit record there, you just said you're not a fan of the canned intro, so I just figured I'd give you one right there. But thanks for jumping on.
My name is enough as an intro. That's totally fine. I've been an engineer for 15 years, and then I really started writing on LinkedIn in 2022, I think, and I just use it as purely as a creative outlet, and just started talking to people that liked what I was writing about, and that's pretty much it. And then I don't know. There seems to be an appetite among engineers for people that talk about the things that we do. So
yeah, I think it's really cool, and you do it in a way that isn't super, I don't know, nerdy for lack of a better word, but I don't look at what you post and think oh, I don't understand that. And I'm not an engineer, right? I say that every time on this podcast, but I like following you on LinkedIn because it's a lot of human stuff, right? And personal anecdotes, and not just here's this part and this part, and you put it together and it makes this system. And, there's a lot of that. So
to be honest, engineering school kind of almost killed me because who I am as a person, I like the problem solving aspect of engineering. I thoroughly enjoy that. But going through college and having your brain kind of hammered into the shape that is really good at solving problems and sharpening that sword, I guess, that was really a painful process. I got C's in all of my engineering classes. My liberal arts classes, I took as many of them as I possibly could, and I hardly showed up, and I did really well because that's the stuff that comes naturally to me. And so I think that probably shows up in my writing, in that I have this skill. I am by no means the best engineer in the world, and I understand that. And that was really troubling for a lot of my career because that's what I was getting paid for. But I kind of realized my actual strength is more on the learning and teaching side of things. That's what I actually enjoy.
So what led you to sort of write, I don't know, was it the first post moment, or, was it, I talked to Brooke last week and she, made the funny TikTok and it basically changed her whole life, right? What was it for you that, turned you into I don't know if you want me to call you a LinkedIn creator, but, I think a content creator is at least part of what you do, right? What led you to that?
So I had this one question that I wanted to ask, and I had a 2005 Scion XB, those flying toaster cars. And I had this little thing on the driver's side, and it was this little knob that stuck out. And I was looking at it, I was like, what the heck is that? Because it was right in the channel where the window came up. And I was like, I really wish that I had a community of people that I could ask that question, because that's a really weird niche piece of knowledge that you can't just go up to anybody and hey, what's that actually for? And so that was always kind of in the back of my mind. I really wish that I had a group of people that I could ask these things of and get a decent answer, or at least a good guess. And so then I forget when it was either 2021 or 2022. We were up in Wisconsin. I grew up in Wisconsin. We live down in Florida now, but we go up there every year for a week around the 4th of July. And I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden it kind of hit me as I was sitting on the front porch. I was like, you know what? I should just start writing stuff on LinkedIn. And that's literally how it came to me. And I didn't know what it was going to be. I still don't know what the first post was, but it just felt like the right thing to do. And I started doing it. And then I thoroughly enjoyed when people engaged with it, and I wanted to get to know them, and I wanted to understand who they were. And honestly, it wasn't really about me at all. It was just a thing that I wanted to do and a way to talk to different people when they engage with it. And yeah. I mean, it's organic network growth. That's pretty much what it is.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. In my background is mostly sports broadcasting, but then there was a brief, I guess, time that I spent as an inbound marketer. So the way that I got into the manufacturing industry was I worked for a HubSpot agency in the off seasons of baseball. So like I was doing freelance HubSpot stuff, and then eventually I was like, okay, not going to do 162 games and 165 days anymore. I'll go lean into the marketing stuff. And sort of the pillar of HubSpot was this idea of inbound marketing, which was nothing about your company, but more about the problem that you were trying to solve. So it would be a lot like, okay, I'm trying to palletize this box, and not I work for PSA systems and we build great palletizers. So I think there was a lot of that I heard in your kind of answer there to that question. Was you started posting because you wanted the answers to your questions, and not so much there's that content didn't really exist. Maybe it did on Reddit. But you sort of were like, I'm going to go create this community that I want. I think that's really cool. Is that kind of how you felt?
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned there being a community on Reddit, and like that's just not something that I really ever opened myself up to. I think one thing that I really loved about LinkedIn way early on in the day is it was kind of like a first pass filter on all of the isms, right? Like the things that I didn't really want occupying a lot of my time. People who post on LinkedIn, the people that hire those people are going to see that. And so there's a significant disincentive to be anything less than your best self, right? And so that was what really attracted me to it as a platform. But also I'm like you, like I'm not like a super stodgy, here's all of the things, here's processes, all that kind of stuff. Like that stuff drives me kind of nuts. And so if you come across and you are human on a platform that was notoriously just flat corporate level, congratulations, I agree 100%, all that stuff, it stands out. And that the platform has shifted significantly since then. But honestly, like it doesn't really bother me very much. I'm still not there to get the maximum number of likes on a post. I'm there to sit down for an hour and think about something, and then talk about the people who want to think about that as well, or talk to the people who want to think about that as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned that the platforms change. I think so personally, and not to get into like too into Claude and AI and all of that, but like you could literally sit down and say, I am a CEO at a manufacturing company, write me, 365 LinkedIn posts that I could put into Hootsuite and you get it scheduled. Right. And I hate that. Yep. As a, communications major, former newspaper reporter, all those good things I love to write. So like, I still have a hard rule for myself that I will, I might use Claude or ChatGPT for, I don't know, some sort of idea or something along the lines, but like, I'll never copy and paste a post, right? Or I'll never even, I'd make it a point now on LinkedIn and it takes a while, right? It takes longer. Sometimes I sit there and I'll spend like, I don't know, 45 minutes on one LinkedIn post. And I'm embarrassed to say that, but also it's like, I feel like what I post on LinkedIn is a direct reflection of who I am. So if someone were to meet me in person, they'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. That sounds like Josh. Versus like if I all of a sudden tried to come off as this technical expert in manufacturing, which I'm not, right? All that. How do you feel about where that's going?
Dan and I argue about this quite a bit. So like Dan is my business partner at AeroGrowth. He is very much execution oriented. And so for him, communication is one of those things that he has to execute on. And AI makes that very easy. For me, communication is a form of self-expression, and that's not something I can ever outsource to an AI. I think I find fulfillment in just wrestling with an idea until it becomes mine, and then letting it out into the world after that. And so if I have the nub of an idea and I put it into an AI tool and I say, make this into something that someone would want to read, I've just let something out into the world that I never really owned in the first place. And so I have no incentive to discuss it because it's not everything that was ever really mine. And so I think what we're seeing now with the LinkedIn platform transitioning is sort of an arms race against the AIs, because yes, everybody can get an idea out into the world using the sum average of all the knowledge in on the internet. Basically, like kind of it's motel art, right? And so in order to stand out as a platform, you have to like combat motel art because it exists in such vast quantities that you need to find the things that are uniquely human and elevate them. And they're still figuring that out. I'm confident that there's enough of an incentive to do that, that the platform will eventually converge on that. But I think it's going to be a rocky couple years while that gets figured out.
Yeah. And I'm of the belief too that, no matter the platform, it will always reward authenticity, right? It'll figure out how to, right? Even if maybe you get short-term gains from, I think of it as like the old SEO days of keyword stuffing and things like that, where you're like, okay, you're thinking about SEO and everything that you do from a website perspective. Like if you come up, you're going to open a pizza shop. What do you name it? Oh, I'm going to name my pizza shop, best pizza shop in Pennsylvania. And that's the name of, not a, not a random name, right?
But also like it's not new there either. Like you think about the yellow pages, like what was the goal in the yellow pages? Well, it's to be AAA movers, because that comes before AA movers, which comes before A mover, and so like it's always been this kind of arms race as technology evolves to be seen first. But the problem, like you're saying, is if you optimize for attention is actually very easy to optimize for from a like programmatic, systematic way, but it's very hard to reward someone when they give you your attention if all you've optimized for is to capture it in the first place. So I think I don't know. Would love to share your optimism that platforms will always reward authenticity. I'm not sure that's the case, but I know that humans always will.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we can recognize, right? Like, and I always wonder too, I always have to catch myself because I'm in a world of, marketing and sales and AI and like all these things. And the majority of people just aren't, right? So if I'm talking to somebody that has no clue, like, one of my friends, right, who's not in our world, so to speak, do they really notice the difference between, AI slop and regular post, right? I would like to think they can, but I don't know if they do.
So I would argue very strongly that there's like it might pass the Turing test, where like on a cognitive level you're not necessarily aware, but I feel like on an emotional level you always kind of pick it up, and it's over a period of time. And because AI is great at generating things using a context base, but it always converges back to that same context. But people are more dynamic than that. Like if you're connecting with a person, one day they might be like high on life, and the other day they might be kind of like trying to figure out why all this makes sense. And that's a very normal human cycle to go through that an AI will never replicate. And so I think you mentioned you're not technical. Are you familiar with the uncanny valley?
No, not at all.
Okay. So there's this concept in robotics, and it's like, it's, you can make a humanoid that looks very, very human, but somehow when you get close to being very human, and they might be even pass for human in a still image, there will always be something that's like gives you the ick when it starts talking or starts doing something, because it's like, ugh, that's unsettling. I'm viewing this as a person, but it's behaving like an object, and I hate it. And I feel like that valley, I'm not sure that's anything we'll ever bridge. I mean, I'm kind of optimistic that it's something we'll never bridge, honestly. Like I'd like humans maintain an advantage over machines there.
Yeah, and is there a point where we, as a, I don't know, society, just say like, you know what, that's a little bit too much, right? And I think we we may have gotten there a little bit with certain things, but there are certainly advantages too, right? To AI. Like I give you another example. Like it probably won't surprise you, but I'm not a very handy person. But we were trying to save a little bit of money by installing some chair rail and some boxes and some wallpaper in like our bathroom downstairs. And that's not a project that I would ever do in shop class in high school or whatever. I would figure out like, okay, how do I get out of this class and somehow end up downstairs at the gym to play, basketball or something, or do we have to watch film during shop class, something like that. But now it's like, dang, I wish I would have paid attention in that shop class because I was outside and I'm not even kidding you, Tony. Last weekend, I was in the garage for an hour trying to figure out how to get the transport pin disengaged on a miter saw, which I've never admittedly used a miter saw before last weekend.
Yeah.
And I'm like taking pictures. I'm texting my cousin. I'm calling FaceTime my father-in-law. And I'll be totally honest with you. I took pictures of it from every angle, was uploading to Claude. I'm like, why is this saw not coming all the way up? Why is it stuck? And eventually I was like, show me the transport pin, like circle the transport pin.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, it was that. And I wasn't, I'm unscrewing all these things and it's sliding back and forth. And then finally and it's telling me, oh, you know what? You probably have to take it back because it looks like the transport pin is disengaged. And it wasn't, right? It thought that I had already disengaged it or whatever. And it's like, so it circled it and then I did it. I'm like, wow, there's an hour and a half, 2 hours of my life I don't get back, and that was literally just unboxing the saw, right? And putting the 3 or 4 things together that I had to. I couldn't have done that without AI. And I'm a little embarrassed to say that.
But also like, I enjoy AI as a learning scaffold where it's like, all right, but I've come to the point where I kind of use it in reverse now. And I use it, how do I want to say this? Like, I want to draft everything. I want to sketch my idea out. I want to do all of these things. And then I just ask it to kind of like pressure test it. Like, where am I wrong? How is this wrong? And then I don't always agree with like the feedback there, but it's valuable to have as like a designated devil's advocate because I can yell at it and it doesn't care. And I don't know. It's interesting and it's cool to see how our relationships are evolving with these tools. Like, it makes you capable of things that you weren't capable of previously, and it makes me capable of things that I wasn't capable of previously. But also the things that I'm uniquely well suited for, I will never outsource to an AI because I find it fulfilling.
Yeah. And the cool thing that I sort of like about it too is you can ask an AI, questions that you probably wouldn't necessarily Google or that you definitely wouldn't call someone and ask, right? Like the example of the saw, right? I was, okay, I can troubleshoot for an hour now before I call my father-in-law and feel like, an incapable idiot.
Well, this is very interesting. And actually like the early usages for AIs were as like de facto therapists. That's like one of the biggest things. And it's for that reason, because like I can be comfortable asking a computer this. It's very difficult to Google. But there's enough knowledge out about these things out in the world that you can get a reasonably like a C+ answer to it. And that's better than a not answer that you're sitting there churning around in your mind. So the business implications for this are fascinating though, because now like which is your AI of choice?
I like Claude.
Same. Yeah. But up until a few months ago, I really liked ChatGPT. And then Claude said, hey, guess what? You can now write code. And that changed everything. But that small change means that they, like, the AI race, in my opinion, is not about who's going to have the most customers paying them. The monthly subscription is simply to cover costs. The AI race is a race to gather as much data about the human condition as has ever been possible in the history of humanity. Because now you have people coming to you not with, how do I optimize this search for Google? Like 2015 Chrysler Town and Country side panel, You click through the results. You're saying, hey, there's something wrong with my car. I need you to help me figure it out. And through that, what they're learning is not necessarily about your car, but about how you approach problem solving, about how you approach different things. And then if you get even deeper into it, you could conceivably come to an AI and say, like, look, there's a problem in my marriage. Help me with this. And so what the amount of anthropological data that they're able to gather about how humans interact with other humans and machines is just completely out of this world. And the fact
Yeah.
that Reddit was the main training source for a lot of the larger models is fascinating to me because it's just pure human to human, anonymous, unfiltered conversation.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. And I think there was, and I don't know if this happened to you too, but there was a point in my life where I went from Googling everything to saying the same thing, but adding the word Reddit to the end of it. Like I'll give you an example. It's like I found these Olakai slippers that I love, and I wouldn't have found them without Reddit because I was like, most comfortable men's slippers that you could also wear outside, right?
Yep.
And I don't wear them outside, but I just like the way they feel because I feel like a regular shoe. Yeah, you could go and get the, Eddie Bauer ones or whatever, but I wouldn't have even known what Olakai was without asking Reddit, right? Because Olakai didn't have enough, whatever SEO juice to show up in Google.
Yep.
But there's this community out there that whatever just really cares about men's slippers, right? There's a community for everything on Reddit. And not that I'm like a men's slipper guy, but it's like I want to go to the men's slipper group to ask what slipper they want, and then I want to move on, right? I'm not going to sit there. I'm not going to hang out at the men's slipper Reddit, community.
Become king of the slippers.
But I'm glad it exists because it got me these slippers that I'll just continue to buy every few years for the rest of my life, probably.
Exactly. No, it's very interesting. It points like, I feel like Wikipedia and Reddit and a lot of these other platforms that are very, how do I want to say this? Wikipedia is what happens when you leverage nerds' desire to be right in a positive way. And so like that's what keeps Wikipedia good, is because everybody gets that little bit of a personal boost if they can make an edit and say, oh, you know what? I don't think this is right. You're wrong. I'm the expert. And it's like a way to game the social hierarchy in a way that makes an output that's better for everyone. It's interesting to me because like when I think about it, most of human behavior is driven by incentives and disincentives. And for a very long time, the most meaningful incentive in the Western world was money. But now I think many of the people, are in a comfortable enough money position where they realize like, look, I'm not going to advance beyond that. So if I want to make a meaningful bump to my own perception of value, it has to come socially. And that used to happen within confined social groups. And now it happens more broadly across an entire spectrum of people on the internet, which is, I don't know. I don't know what to do with that. It's just a fascinating evolution of human behavior.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's cool, right? And it's only going to get better and better. Or it could get to the point where it gets so good that it gets really bad, but that's probably another conversation. But, yeah,
it's all a function of like how much people get the ick from the things that are seemingly human but not quite human.
Yeah. And one more question before we move on from AI, because you raised a good point that I take a lot of things that I get from Claude as fact, to be totally transparent with you. But if it's something I really know, like I'll give you one other example. I have not done a great job of paying attention to my fantasy baseball team this year.
Yeah.
And I have this joke. It's like when work is good, my fantasy baseball team is bad. When work is bad, my fantasy baseball team is in really good shape. So, I'm like 3-11, this year. So work's been great. But I was like, you know what? I'm tired of having this. Yeah, I checked on it once in like the last 4 months. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to spend like 20 minutes just at least getting the right players on the team. And then, we'll let it automatically, set the lineup every day. And it's like a daily thing, fantasy baseball. And I asked Claude, I was like, took a screenshot. I was like, here's my team, make it better. It's like, here, pick these two guys up. Those two guys are terrible. They haven't played in 3 weeks. They've been terrible pitchers. It was like the one guy was Cal Raleigh, who had a great year last year. It's been terrible this year. It's like pick up, go get Cal Raleigh as your catcher and trade Chris Sale for him. And Chris Sale's having a good year. Cal Raleigh's having a bad year. Terrible trade. So on the surface, I'm like, oh, I almost sent that trade request. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. That's not right.
Yeah.
And I noticed that about things that I know, like things that I know well, like say HubSpot or, baseball or, I don't know, I check it against running things every once in a while because I like to run. And I'll notice that there is a gap. But I think it does do a good job of getting that C plus answer. But I honestly take a lot of it as like an A answer when I don't know what I'm talking about, right? When I'm working with the saw or I'm trying to figure out why the towel rack won't hang. And I'm like, oh, I've got it upside down, even though it looks the same exact way to my eye, things like that. But is that something you notice too?
Well, and I think it's healthy, right? Like you recognize the limitations of the tool. And so, yeah, it's normal for a predictive engine, like AI, that's what it is. It's like a probability engine. It takes all of the things that are likely to happen based on what it understands about the world, and it says, okay, here we go, this is probably the answer that you want. But it's not anticipatory, and I feel like there's a uniquely human ability. Okay, let's talk about AI as a stereotype machine, because that is essentially what it is. It says, here's a history of behavior, here's a history of results, here is what I understand. But I feel like there's a uniquely human ability to understand potential and to understand small indicators that might not be obvious to other people and things like that. I feel like there's a uniquely human element that gets you from your C plus to your B minus to your B to your B plus to your A. But that transition up the ladder requires significant amount of human effort. So I wrote something about this the other day, and somebody just said, I treat AI as an intern. Like, I'm going to audit their work very carefully. It's probably not actually going to save me a ton of time in the long run because I'm gonna do it, but it's like a way to kind of just offload it for the time and then come back and check on it. So
and like an intern, it gets better over time, right? Like I think there is, if you know the right reasoning or the right questions to ask, like you could help that model get to the right answer, so to speak, right? I've noticed that. But
so okay, I did an exercise a while back. I paid somebody to download my entire LinkedIn history. And I'm not talking like all of my posts. I'm talking all of my posts, every comment, every engagement, everybody that reacted, every comment that I made in reverse. And then I was like, cool, AI is a fantastic pattern recognition engine. I want to feed this into that pattern recognition engine and then have it generate a profile of like who I am as a person. But the problem was, it's 4 years of data. And so when it goes back, it biases toward the most recent, which AI tends to do. That's kind of a shortcut. Anyway, we get into that later, but basically it gave me the midpoint of who I was over those 4 years, which is a different person than I was at any point during those 4 years. And so, yes, trend wise, you could kind of squint your eyes from 20 feet and say, yeah, that looks like Tony. But it would never, ever write a post that sounds exactly like me, because it's the net average of all of my traits, which is me on a completely flat and depressed day when I don't write very much,
Yeah. I think that's a great point, right? Because the other thing that I think it brings up is there are probably 10 different versions of you, right? And different versions resonate with different people. So, when I think of you, I think, okay, it's the guy who can eat a burrito, who without, dropping anything, Chipotle burrito, nobody could do that. We can get into that later. But, it's that, it's, AeroGrowth, it's, LinkedIn following, all those things. But there might be someone out there that you've helped from a super technical aspect or an engineering aspect, which, to be honest with you, engineering doesn't really resonate with me.
No.
But, the LinkedIn stuff does, the human stuff does. So, yeah, I think that's something I would guess.
How do I want to say this? There are people that have like legit relationships with AI, and there are people that like it's like a partner to them, and that's very unhealthy. Like in my opinion, that's indicative of a severe lack somewhere in their life, and while that will be a band-aid for a while, it's a bleak existence. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really want to end on that note, but
No. I got some time. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll move on from the AI stuff. I mean, yeah, we could sit here and talk about that forever, right? But one of the other things that I wanted to ask you too is, talk about your normal day to day right now. And almost how I think it's fascinating to see who someone was, and take this at 35,000 foot view, right? Like, who were you at 10, and when you were a kid, did you know you wanted to be an engineer, right? Were you playing with the Tinker Toys? Were you playing with Lincoln Logs? Were you doing Legos, like, or and now to where you are now? Like, are you surprised at where you are now? Would you have guessed that you would be almost like a community leader, right?
So, all right, my life has two separate factions here. There's the personal development, and then there's a professional development. Personal development is something that my life as a kid, like I grew up with very unstable influences, very unhealthy and unstable influences, which meant that for a lot of my own personal well-being, I had to kind of figure out how to provide for myself. And I'm trying to figure out how to say this. Let's say that a lot of the work that I've done hasn't had any professional payoff at all. Like, I have spent a lot of time working on things that are very deeply personal that other people kind of take for granted as part of being a healthy human being. I've been in therapy for a very long time. I've taken a lot of different drugs to like get my head right, and that's a result of my upbringing. But also, it's made me. Have you ever listened to oh my goodness, this is tough for me, Josh, because I have to be very careful about how I walk around it. So please apologize. Please.
Sure. No, take your time.
I think I've struggled with depression and bipolar depression for most of my life, where I'll have these very high highs where I feel completely invincible, 100% confident, and then these very low lows where I feel like nothing matters and what's the point? And so I picture life as kind of like climbing a mountain. And I don't think I even started climbing the mountain until about 10 years ago, because I just kept walking along flat ground and falling in holes and then climbing. But the thing about that is the strength you develop climbing out of the holes is the exact same strength you need for climbing the mountain. So once you finally get to it, you're like, hey, look at that. Life can get better. This is great. And so I think repeatedly falling in those holes, repeatedly falling in the traps, repeatedly dealing with the tough things in life means that I can empathize for people, that I can sympathize with people that are struggling, and I can understand why people behave the way that they do, even though it's harmful to them and the people that they love. So all of that said means that I have like a pretty deeply intuitive sense for how people work. The thing that I always went to when I was younger as a way to like engage the critical thinking part of my mind instead of the emotional part of my mind, which wasn't very healthy, was the problem solving. It was tackling a problem. It was getting lost in a problem for a very long time because it was peaceful. It was an escape. And so developing the tools necessary in engineering school to do that was challenging because I did it on an intuitive basis where I wanted to explore. And engineering school is like, hey, we're going to learn about calculus. And I'm like, I
Mhm.
don't care at all. Like, why is
Yeah.
this important? How does this help me? But then when I had those teachers that could say like, okay, calculus, this is a curve, and you can tell how far you're going along that curve using this mathematical thing. Um, Imagine that curve is the rate at which you're filling up a swimming pool. Now, calculus tells you how full the pool is as you go along over time. And I'm like, okay, cool. This is awesome. That makes sense. It makes sense to me that I would want to understand that because it tells me something new about the world. And so for me, like everything about my technical education was about exploration, and I had jobs where a lot of what I was doing was exploratory. And then I had jobs where a few years of it was exploratory, and then the remaining 4 years was just repetition on the same. And I almost died, man. Like that's
Yeah.
horrible. And then, so I thought that novelty was like the solution to it. And so I worked for a small design firm, um, just doing like, there, there are some people that spend money developing ridiculous things. Let's just put it, injection molded bullhorns for the front of your Cadillac. That doesn't need to exist, but it still has technical problems that are required to be, that need to be solved in order to exist. And so you kind of like suspend your judgment on whether it's a worthy thing and just say, hey, I'm just going to get lost in the fun technical aspect of it.
Yeah.
Now, where I'm at right now, the technical knowledge, like that's still there, but it's much more an engineering approach to human relationship development and business development. So I worked with Omni Ventures as an advisor for a long time, and they found early on that mechanical engineers tend to make good founders because mechanical engineers tend to be the engineers that are like, I know I want to solve problems. I'm not really married to what flavor those problems come in. I just kind of want to go out and figure stuff out. And that's really valuable on the business side because you're able to identify problems, but then you have a structure for working through those questions that leads you to an answer more quickly. And that's very painful to develop for somebody that is an explorer,
Mhm.
but once you have that tool, it doesn't go away. And so that's what I'm leveraging right now. Like sales coaching, and business operations coaching and mechanical engineering seem very different, but ultimately, like the tools that you're using are an intuitive sense for how people work combined with a framework for how problems are solved. And when you
Yeah.
stack those on top of each other, it gets really powerful really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, do you feel in some ways that you're solving for a skill that, and not to offend, most of our audience here, but that engineers just typically don't have? Because what I've noticed in the industry, right, is, the the best engineers sometimes don't love to talk to people, right? Just to, you know, but then also if you get the engineer that could also talk to people, that's like the golden goose, right? That's how they become, great salespeople and, things like that, right? But
And they're equally disrespected by the engineers and the people that they're talking to. So it's perfect.
yeah, exactly.
The best at either one of those things,
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and I think that's what keeps people from doing it. But the engineers not being like great at talking to people, um, it's it's true, but also it's kind of a function of translation because I think the engineering mindset is okay. I've talked about this more than once, but like I was in a sales meeting one time and I'm the engineer that can talk to people. So I was talking and I was shushed by the sales manager because the story that I was telling didn't match the story that they had kind of sold to the customer. And that's a horrible way to live, man. Like that, that sucks. Like I always want to be looking at reality and like objectively, no, here is the actual problem that we're trying to solve. Now you can get on board with that or you can run away from it, but like this exists and it's not going to
Yeah.
go away. Um, and so I think like I worked with this one guy. Oh my gosh, he was the best. I love this guy. He was like the grumpy old engineer, but he would always say like nothing is simple, and it's true. Like nothing is actually simple, and it's a really upsetting message to hear if you're trying to be like, why is this project not progressing? Well, it's because nothing is simple. We hit a wall, and that's
Yeah.
reality. And so I think the difficulty of talking to engineers is because like they they don't necessarily place a lot of importance on how the message is going to be received. They place a lot of importance on whether the conversation leads to the resolution of a problem.
Yeah. And is that something you look at in your coaching and in your conversations? Whereas, because I've been a part of all of these conversations, right? Where it's like, okay, the quarter ends in 4 days. And I know if I say this one thing that we're going to get a PO and we can worry about the change order in Q2, right? And I'm not saying that happens at PSA. I'm just saying in general that happens in the industry. And then there's that other piece where, like you said, you're getting shushed by the sales manager, but also the engineer is like, I would never sign off on this project. And then the sales guy is like, oh, this is just the same project that we did. It's exactly like the one we did 4 months ago. And, it's like, it's not at all, right? Is that something where you sort of take all of those things, put them into one and help, help solve for that problem or help, better communication at least, or, what's the approach there?
Well, I think you get everybody understanding that like ultimately they're on the same team. And so
Mm-hmm.
like let's take the design firm for example. Um, Whether or not it's going to be easy or difficult is completely irrelevant because your customer has paid you to accomplish a thing, and you're putting your best efforts into accomplishing the thing. And so your customer may have expectations of receiving something specific for what they paid you, but with design, that's unrealistic because you're creating something that didn't exist before by definition. And so if you set an expectation that this will be done in 3 months and here's what it is without any real parameters around it, you set yourself up for failure. What you can say is, here's what we understand about the problem. Here's where we see opportunities for solution. And here's where we're going to focus our efforts, and we'll report back with what we find. If we hit a dead end there, this is the next path. If we hit a dead end there, this is the next path. If we hit a dead end there, we really need to reevaluate whether this is worth developing because obviously it's going to require significant investment. And that is the most real way that you can possibly sell a design project. But a lot of people want to approach it as, look at this beautiful could be. We're going to get you that. And like, you can't guarantee that. You cannot guarantee it. Like, I've been on multiple projects where, like, yes, the could be is great, but also the reality of the manufacturing processes mean that you can't get the wall thickness you need to support the load. So it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so I think like a great engineering project is structured in phases when it's a ground up development. So you'd have an initial phase of like exploring the space, understanding the problem, getting very clear on the spec. You'd have a second phase that is, here's the spec, here's a prototype that meets that spec, and here's what we found out as a result. That's going to be a problem in the next phase. And then you have a second phase that is, all right, here's what we learned from the prototype. Here's how that transitions into a product that might be ready for production. And, but you have to get paid for each of those steps. And many times a customer is not willing to pay for the first two.
No. Well, that was going to be my follow-up question before you kind of answered, is like, how do you solve for, so much of manufacturing is reputation, reputation, reputation. And the best way to get that is by having successful projects. The best way to have successful projects is to, honestly give a ton of free engineering in the beginning, right? And hope that you've built enough trust to get that PO.
I disagree.
Like where
I disagree, and I don't think you
Okay.
ever give engineering away for free. And the reason I say that is I think the most successful projects are the result of a well-educated customer on what they can expect. Because like when they start to appreciate the value of engineering and they appreciate the value of exploring the space and they see the interim, like a spec doesn't seem like a deliverable, but it's the most valuable deliverable in the entire project because it defines everything else about it. And so if you help them understand, like, your project will only be successful if you have a well-defined spec, and we will explore the problem space enough to develop that with you. You don't have to give anything away that's valuable. And if they don't recognize that it's valuable, then they're not a good customer.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yeah.
And I guess I was thinking too, probably more so on, say, the automation side of things, where you've got to put concepts together to, sort of even get an at bat, right? But that all, and then but what happens a lot of times is like at surface level, you take it, and, the engineer goes on site, you're like, yeah, no problem. Then you get back and you start digging in and you're like, oh, wow, there's, the sales guy didn't take a picture of that, that post that's, right where we want to put our stretch wrapper, or, the only place that it could go, things like that. But yeah, no, I think that's all great. And before I let you go, go ahead. Sorry.
No. We're good.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, and that's the problem, or not the problem, but one thing it's like, with these podcasts that I've noticed I've been doing, it's like, at some point it can't become a Joe Rogan, 3-hour podcast, right? But it could, because you get, two guys just, two people talking about, stuff. And at the end of the day, I always think it's like, for me, I'm thinking about this podcast. I'm like, wow, this is going great. But then at the end of it, it's like, okay, well, how long is too long? Can I keep going? Oh, I wonder if he has more time after 11, like things like that, right? But yeah, no, this has been great. And I wanted to leave, kind of on a note where it's, you share a lot on LinkedIn, both personally and professionally. What's something that, maybe someone wouldn't know about you from LinkedIn, or, maybe it's a hobby that you have, or, something lighthearted, right? You already got into the hard stuff, but yeah, what do you got?
I have, my wife is an animal person, like big time. She worked at a zoo for a really long time. And so we have a tank of dermested beetles. And what those are is like flesh-eating beetles. And so we can take like a snake and put them in the tank of beetles, and it eats all the flesh off of them, and you're left with just a snake skeleton. And it's really cool.
Oh my goodness. I was not expecting that in a million years. Yeah. It's almost like you had that ready to go.
I know. I had to think, and I had to borrow from my wife, honestly. It's like more her interest than mine, but I built the tank, and I've got all the lights in there and the fan and the ventilation and stuff like that. So anyway,
nice.
It's
awesome.
And if you stick a GoPro on it and do a time lapse, it's wild, because like the snake just kind of goes and completely disappears onto a skeleton. It's crazy.
Oh my goodness, that's crazy.
Actually.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then one last question. Let's try and fast forward 5-10 years. What do you hope your day looks like 5 to 10 years from now? Are you the get in and get out, get what you need, retire, and just become a LinkedIn, or keep the LinkedIn part? What are some of your goals here in the shorter or longer term?
It's honestly hard to say what will be fulfilling for me in 5 to 10 years, but I hope that up until then I've been able to work as much as possible on things that are fulfilling. Like a while ago, I thought that it would be awesome to be able to just sit in a room and write and think. And now I realize, like, that's cool. There's more to it than that. And so I don't know what 5 to 10 years will look like, but I plan to keep doing the things that I find personally fulfilling and see where it ends up.
Are there times when you struggle to get a post out? I think of, Yeah, like I was mentioning earlier, I try to make sure that I don't write with Claude at all, right? I mean, I'm sitting down and I'm writing it. There's some days where I'm like, cool, I know exactly what I'm going to write about. And then there are other days where I'm like, oh gosh, I got to post something. It's Tuesday.
Actually kind of a litmus test for me on how healthy I am, because like that's,
Yeah.
I have a lot of litmus tests actually. One is my camera roll in my phone, and if I flip through it and I find there are more screenshots and all of this kind of stuff than there are pictures of my family, I realize like, hey, I need to take a break. And with posting, I find that if I'm like feeling like I need to crank something out just to get something out there, because I do it daily, then I realize like, hey, this probably isn't healthy. You can't pour from an empty pitcher. It's time to go do something else for a bit, you know?
Yeah. I like that.
Yep.
Well, cool. I think that's a good place to end, and we'll get into a lot more with AeroGrowth. We were joking on the front. I sent the invite for this one. I spelled Dan's last name wrong, but yeah, we'll get an AeroGrowth one here, here in the near future. But this has been awesome, Tony. I really appreciate the time and appreciate all you do for PSA and all you do for the community and even on LinkedIn. Right, you're a great follow, and if you want to leave people a place where they can see you, follow you, let them know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so Dan and I have started the AeroGrowth podcast. Again, it's not really like any specific industry focus or anything like that. It's just stuff that we found fulfilling, stuff that we find interesting, stuff that we want to talk about. I mean, like, that's what it is. So it's the AeroGrowth podcast on Spotify and YouTube, I think. Brooke Lang is managing that. I think she was
Cool.
on relatively recently, but
yeah. Awesome.
All right.
Well, thanks, Tony. I appreciate it, and looking forward to next time.
Yeah, sounds good.